Hey everybody, so we are going to continue with our unit of measurement. Last couple of weeks we've been learning about the customary system, which we use in America. Today we're going to talk about the system that actually most of the rest of the world uses, and that is the metric system. Okay, so the metric system was actually designed in 1670 by a guy named Gabriel Mouton, who decided that we needed a system of measurement that was way easier to use. Okay, so when we talked about the customary system, remember we have like foot, cup, pint, bushel. There's so many different ways to measure, right? So Gabriel Mouton wanted a system that was efficient and that it made sense and that it had all the same units to measure, okay? So he actually did something really cool. He found the length that it took from the North Pole, like down the equator, to the South Pole. And he discovered this unit of measurement called a meter. Okay, a meter is 1/1,000,000th actually of the distance of that equator from the North to the South Pole. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the metric system, specifically the units that we use to measure length, mass, and volume. Okay, so if you do not have your notebook and your pencil, and hopefully some different colored crayons or markers, please pause this video and go grab your notebook and pencil and those things. Okay, so we are going to head over to our notebooks, and the first thing we are going to talk about is, first, make sure you have your title. It should look a little, oh, hold on, Miss K doesn't have it plugged in. Un momento. So let me pause this for a second.
Okay, so that should be a little better now. So you should have your notebook, and please title it The Metric System, okay? So the metric system, again, it is broken up into 3 base units, okay? So the 3 base units that we talk about are going to be for, let's talk about length, right? Length, we have meters. Okay, so when we use meters, we are measuring the length of something usually. For the mass or like the weight, so mass is like another way you can say weight, okay? We use grams. You're going to use that probably a lot in science eventually, okay? And last but not least, when we go to measure volume, right, or how much like stuff is in something, we actually use liters. And you're like, hey, I have heard of a liter before, right? If you grab a 2 liter of soda, that's how much liquid is in that can, okay? So the 3 cool, lovely base units we use are, again, meter for length, gram for mass, and liter for volume, okay? So we say our base units. Those are 3 units of measurement for the metric system, okay? Now, the cool thing about these 3 units is that we can use something called prefixes to tell us if an object or liquid or solid is something larger or smaller, okay? To do that, we use something called prefixes, which we attach to the beginning of our words, meter, gram, or liter, okay? So what I'm going to do really quickly, which I want to make sure you do as well, I'm going to write prefix. Now, you might actually know this definition from ELA. That's a really cool thing about the different content areas. We do have a ton of overlap. Okay, so even though prefixes is something you learn about in ELA, we also talk about it in math and science. So we add this. Okay, we add toward the beginning of our base. So again, our bases are our meters, our grams, and liters. Meter, grams, and liters. Okay. So we're first going to talk about length. We're going to talk about the different kinds of meters. Okay. So when I talk about meters, I'm going to do this lovely little section for myself. And I'm going to tell us some of the common ones, right? So we have a millimeter. A millimeter is something super, super, super tiny, okay? But before we can define a millimeter, we have to think about, how do I know about how long is an actual meter, right? Because if we're talking about length, do any of you guys play an instrument? think about a guitar. A guitar is about the length of a meter. Okay, so it's a little bit longer than a foot. Okay, I'm sorry, a yard. It's a little bit longer than a yard. So I'm going to say for myself, about the length of a guitar. Okay. So that should give us a reference point for when we think of meters, how long it should be. So a meter is about the length of a guitar. A millimeter is actually going to be way smaller. And here's how much smaller. It is about 1,000 times smaller than a meter. 1,000 times smaller than a meter. So that should tell you a millimeter is really tiny. If you've ever looked at a ruler, and in fact, I have one right here. If you've ever looked at a ruler, there are two sides to the ruler, right? We have inches, which are usually the longer ones like this. And then if you flip it over, you'll notice you also have centimeters on this side. A millimeter is actually, let me see if I can get this to focus for you guys. A millimeter is like the, oh, hold on. Now it doesn't want to focus on me at all. A millimeter are those tiny lines in between centimeters, right? So from here, 1 to 2, that's a whole centimeter. Those little tiny lines are millimeters, okay? So to give you like a reference point of a millimeter, it's about as thick as a credit card. That's how tiny a millimeter is. Okay, so picture like a credit card. So I'm going to say credit card. It's thin, right? So think of how thin a credit card is. That should give you an idea for a millimeter, okay? So again, if I'm writing too fast or talking too fast, take a second, pause this, and make sure you jot this down in full and nice and neat, because guess what? You are going to be showing me your notebook, okay? So we've talked about the base unit of a meter. Now notice we added milli onto it, right? Milli, actually, believe it or not, means 1,000. Because you might be like, no, okay. Think of it. Milli, that prefix means 1,000. So that's how we remember it's 1,000 times smaller than an actual meter, right? Think of how thin a credit card is. It's about 1,000 times smaller than the length of a guitar. Okay. Our next one we're going to talk about is a centimeter. So I'm going to say centimeter. Now, you're probably going to be like, okay, centimeters, I remember. Again, if you take any typical ruler, as we know, one side is always inches, and usually it'll indicate for you. And if not, so like here, see how it says centimeters. Okay. A centimeter is from 1 to 2, or 0 to 1, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. Okay. So you can see right now, if I put it down on my paper, a centimeter is literally like from here to here. It's pretty tiny. Okay. Again, it's actually about the width of your fingernail. Look here. See my fingernail? That's about as wide or as long as a centimeter is. Okay. So comparing a centimeter to a meter, a centimeter is about 100 times smaller. So a centimeter is about 100 times smaller than a meter. Okay. And again, what did we say we're going to think about when we try to figure out how long a centimeter is? I'm going to say wide as a fingernail. So think about the width of your fingernail. Okay, so that should help you figure that out. Width of your fingernail. There's one more really important prefix and base that we're going to talk about. Or should I say one more measurement. So we've done millimeters, we've done centimeters, and we are going to do something a little bigger now, a kilometer, okay, or kilometer. You can say kilometer or kilometer. Now, again, remember, this has to do with distance. Fun fact, if you go to other countries, instead of having their speed limit signs like 25 miles per hour, it'll say like 40 kilometers per hour. Okay, because again, other countries use the metric system. They don't use the customary system like America does. Even Canada has all of their speedway signs in kilometers. It can be pretty confusing. But next time you're in your parents' car, look at the speedometer. They actually have kilometers listed below the miles per hour. Pretty cool. Okay. All right. A kilometer, this is actually larger than a meter. So a kilometer, and I actually realized I have not been writing the abbreviation, so that's okay. I'll write it for this one. A kilometer, which we abbreviate as km, is actually 1,000 times as large, so or 1,000 times larger, let's say, than a meter. So remember, kilometers have to do with distance. A kilometer, the whole distance, if you're trying to think in your head, how long is a kilometer? That's about the distance that you could walk in 10 minutes. So if you went outside and you walked about for 10 minutes straight without stopping, you would have walked probably about a kilometer. Okay. So think of walking for 10 minutes. That's how long it is. Okay. Whew. So this was all just about length, right? We just talked about length. All of this had to do with the units for measuring length, right? We have meters, millimeters, centimeters, and kilometers. Okay. So our next one we're going to talk about today is grams. Okay. So grams again. Grams have to do with calculating the mass of something. Okay. So calculating the mass of something. So I'm going to come down here and I'm actually going to bump my notebook up just a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to say grams. Grams, we need to figure out about how long is 1 gram, or how much how much does 1 gram weigh? Okay, so if I think about the mass of something, the mass of a paperclip, right? One little paperclip. That's about 1 gram. So if you're trying to figure out how heavy would something be, I'm trying to see if I have a paperclip right here to show you guys. I do. Okay. So this is about the weight of a gram right here. This little guy, just this. Okay. 1 gram. So as you can see, it's for something that's pretty small, right? It's not very heavy. Okay. So what do we talk about? What's the most common when we think of grams? The most common one we actually talk about is a kilogram. Okay. So there's not as many important ones we're going to talk about today for grams as there are for meters, but a kilogram is also still really important. Okay. So again, think of this. If a kilometer was 1,000 times as a meter, a kilogram is going to be, you guessed it, 1,000 times larger than a gram. So what that means is if I had 1,000 of these paper clips right here, 1,000 of them, that would be 1 kilogram. You want to know what is about as heavy as a kilogram? A pineapple. That has the mass, I should say, about 1 kilogram. So think of something around the size or weight of a pineapple. Yum. Now I'm getting hungry, guys. Okay. Yup.